Hello, my name is Paul Stewart and I'm at Sydney International Airport where I'm about to fly to Brisbane for 60 minutes and then turn around and fly back to Sydney again. Brisbane's too hot, I just get sunburnt and people smell funny there anyway. So the real reason I'm flying to Sydney is because Qantas have put the 747 on the domestic route and I've managed to get on board. As you may know, they're retiring the 747 fleet in the next 2 years, so I'm taking every advantage I can to get on board. So coming up is me being sentimental about the Qantas 747, the Queen of the Skies, for the next 15 minutes.
This video will be a bit different to normal as I won't be focusing on the usual seat, meal and service, etc., but rather on the aircraft itself. The flight was only an hour and there wasn't time to really appreciate the business class service. In fact, the only reason I flew in business was because I wanted a good view of the wing, which I think I got. Now the journey began in the lounge with a group of friends where we admired the view. The Qantas Sydney First Class Lounge honestly has some of the best avgeek views in the world, and I'll include a link to a proper review of that lounge in the video description below. Here's footage of a Qantas A380-800 partially obscured by British Airways 777's tail. While the A380 is arguably more comfortable to fly in and has got the Super Jumbo tag, it certainly will never be the Queen of the Skies. Now here's our aircraft arriving, VH-OEJ, or Oscar Echo Juliet, which was the 57th and final Boeing 747 delivered to Qantas. This particular model is a -400ER, and Qantas were the only airline to ever purchase the passenger version of this aircraft. Essentially, the takeoff weight was increased 15 tonnes to a total of 412 tonnes, and the airline could choose between more fuel, which would give an extra 800 kilometres of range, or more payload. The extra range was particularly useful for Qantas because a few of their routes, such as flights to Johannesburg and Santiago, don't really have many places to divert to if fuel gets low. Here's my seat, and of course the first thing I check is that I get a good view out the window of the wing and engines. And coming up later, I've got some amazing views out of the window as we take off from Sydney, fly over the Gold Coast and land into Brisbane. The first interesting thing I'll mention are the Kruger flaps on the leading edge or the front of the wings, which are unique to the 747, other than a few older airliners such as the 707. Most modern airliners, such as the 777 you're about to see, have slats which extend forward from the wing's leading edge. Both designs create lift, and according to Wikipedia, the Kruger flaps worked well, but they're quite complex, hence why you don't see them on many other airliners. It was now time to hit the skies, and this time I won't fast forward through the takeoff footage. Keep an eye on the Kruger flaps folding away, some stunning views of Sydney CBD, and enjoy the General Electric CF6's explode fuel into music and a lot of thrust. On the topic of the wings, you'll notice a 1.8 metre winglet which was introduced with the Dash 400 model to reduce drag. Now Qantas badge all of their Dash 400 models with long reach, and I often hear at airports people saying that they've flown in long reach before, but that's just because the entire Qantas jumbo fleet has long reach written on it. All of the aircraft are also given a name, and ours today was called Wanala and was previously painted in the Wanala Dreaming Indigenous Art livery. And going back to the wings, it's interesting to compare it with the newer 747-8 where they've removed the winglets and replaced them with an upward bending wings which essentially does the same thing, and I might add looks absolutely fantastic. For interest's sake, here's a view from the top deck of a 747-8 from a recent flight I took with Lufthansa. And here we are back in the Qantas 747-400, although also in the upper deck. See the familiar winglet again. This actual aircraft is VH-OJU, which holds the record for the longest non-stop flight by a commercial aircraft, which was 20 hours from London to Sydney. That aircraft is now retired at the Haas Museum just south of Wollongong, and I've uploaded a video where I tour through that aircraft. Link below in the video description. The flight path took us out over the ocean before we turned slightly west to fly up Australia's eastern coast. The view was pretty impressive, and here you can see the city of Yamba. Shortly afterwards, the descent down into Brisbane began, and fortunately there was a break in the cloud to get a brief glimpse of the Gold Coast. For those subscribers not familiar with Australia, the Gold Coast is our culture capital. It's often described as our Oxford or Prague by people who have never been to Oxford or Prague. Anyway, it looked cool from 30,000 feet. In fact, the weather made for an almost perfect and interesting landing into Brisbane, as there was enough light to illuminate everything and enough clouds to make it interesting. At this time, I might quickly spam my Instagram and Facebook account. Check out those for heaps more aviation content as well as updates about new videos. Now, as I said at the start of the video, Qantas are retiring their entire 747 fleet, with one actually just sent to the desert last week. It's sad to see, although somewhat understandable when you consider that aircraft like the A380 are more comfortable and airlines seem to be moving towards big twins. Alas, the Queen of the Sky will be missed. It was an incredibly impressive piece of engineering and revolutionised air travel, in part because it was just so big and tickets were cheap. It was interesting to consider the fact that Boeing never expected it to be a success and planned for it to sell mostly as a freighter. This is why the flight deck was on the top story, so that the nose could open up and allow freight to easily move in and out. In the end, supersonic travel didn't take off. Boeing cancelled the SST aircraft program, and the Jumbo became one of the most successful airliners ever built. I was fortunate enough to walk around the first ever Boeing 747 at the Museum of Flight in Seattle last December and put together a video from that tour. The link to that is in the video description below. Now, not only was the 747 significant for Boeing and the travelling public, but also for Qantas, who operated 65 Jumbos. In fact, between 1978 and 1985, their entire fleet was 747s. And it made up a major part of their international fleet into the future, with it being their flagship until the A380 arrived. The Qantas 747 also had a significant place in the history books, as in 1974 they set a world record flying 673 people out of Darwin following Cyclone Tracy. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the Qantas 747. Comment below with your first flight in one and how they're significant for you. Also, do you intend on chasing a flight in one before they're retired? Due to the 737 pilot shortage, Qantas are actually putting them onto flights to Perth regularly, as well as infrequent ones between Brisbane and Sydney, such as the one today. So you may be in luck if you don't want to fly one to Los Angeles or Hong Kong. Now, as we come into land, keep an eye out on the Kruger flaps. Interestingly, as we touch down, the inner flaps are retracted as to avoid damage from debris thrown up by the reverse thrust. I've always wondered why they did this, but now I know. Thanks, Wikipedia. Thanks for watching what may well have been my final Qantas 747 flight. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did making it. Make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you check out my channel for heaps more aviation related videos. And don't forget my tour through VH-OJA at Haas south of Wollongong and through the first ever 747 in Seattle. All of those links are in the video description below. Thanks again, and see you another time.